Welcome to the AceMind training system.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bedomy and this is BlazBlue Entropy Effect, a 2D side-scrolling roguelike developed and published by 91 Act, whom you might know as the developers behind the mobile game BlazBlue R&R, if I'm not mistaken, which was a mobile game that never got ported to anything else but mobile devices, but from what I saw, the reviews for it were pretty decent and the gameplay seemed very authentic to BlazBlue. And by the looks of it, Arc System Works shared that notion and gave them a green light to make this game. But the end result is somewhat of a mixed bag for me. On one hand, the gameplay is fun and the story is interesting. But on the other, the characters of BlazBlue are not even present. They're just random avatars in a virtual training program, which has been organized by a shadowy company because the world is getting covered by an unknown substance. And your character has to go through a training regiment in order to help clean up the world. As you progress through the game, you'll unlock more story bits and find out more about the story, but this is just the general premise of it. I haven't finished the game yet, and I really don't want to spoil it for anyone else who wishes to play this. So without further ado, let's take a look at the game in front of us. The moment you boot up the game, you'll see a very distinct 2D artwork that favors a bit more scientific and robotic. I'm not sure what to even call it. It's not well, it is an aesthetic. It's a laboratory-like view into the situation you're in, to put it mildly. It is emulating the feeling of BlazBlue's visuals, but it's not BlazBlue. It's honestly hard to explain, but once you see it, you will notice it, and it will stay with you for the rest of the game. It could be the difference in genres. BlazBlue started off as a 2D fighter with a close-up view of the characters as they duke it out in the streets of the city, and Entropy Effect is a 2D platforming action, so that might be it. For starters, the original fighting games had a camera a lot closer to the fighters so you could see how the whole action played out. But that was not the only thing that the games usually paid attention to. There was also a lot of crowds, machinery, and other smaller animations that gave off, well, a feeling that this was a live world. You had characters fighting on a moving train, so you'd see machinery working its magic while you traversed through the area. Or you had another train passing by. Or you had characters viewing, cheering, and reacting to your characters fighting. This game has none of that. It's just a big wide open space, and the only animation you can see is the animation of your character and the enemies as they come towards you. And that's boring. There's nothing to pay attention to. There are no Easter eggs or environmental storytelling. It's just a big simulation, and that's about it. I understand this is intentional due to story reasons, but small details change the environment in very big ways. For the most obvious example, let's take a look at Poison Mist. It's a level hazard you will encounter on the 3rd level, and you will immediately know it's something dangerous because it's dark and purple, and it sounds like it's bad news. But did you know that it's also a hazard to your enemies? Probably not, because there's nothing that indicates that it does damage to everyone. Well, you'd probably assume that, but it would be nice if there was an armor piece or a weapon there just to confirm it. But that's just a minor gripe on my end. As background animations go, these are fine. But when you see what came before that and look at what you have now, you will be a bit disappointed. Granted, if you export most of these levels as background animations for your desktop or your stream, they'd be perfect because it's just some idle animations you have while you're waiting for the stream to start or end. But those are only background animations. The biggest effort was put into character animations, and the animators really did their job on this one. Every animation is crisp, clean, and you can tell what the character is about to do, judging by the silhouette itself. The only issue you might have is the animation timing. Most wind-up animations take a second or two, so you'll have ample time to dodge, jump, get across, attack, or counter the enemy attack when it comes in. Granted, if this is your first time playing a roguelike, this game is a pretty decent starting point because you will learn how to recognize patterns and also recognize when it's a good time to attack and when to retreat. You'll get enough video and audio cues that will help you recognize when's a good time to pull back or when's a good time to attack. And that goes for both bosses and regular NPCs. Even if the enemy gets off screen and starts winding up for an attack, you'll hear a cue for it and you'll be able to dodge it. And mind you, we're only talking about hostile sound effects. Once you hear your character's sound effects, you'll think that you're the end boss of some other game. The way they announce them and just pose for them shows off how powerful and confident these characters are. And I love them for it. And this is why I actually fell in love with BlazBlue, honestly. The animations and the small details of the characters and the sound design that followed them just ooze with personality. And that's why I fell in love with them. They lived in an over-the-top world and had to wear their personalities on their sleeves. Which is understandable considering this was originally a fighting game, but that's the beauty of it. The amount of personality and effort that had to go into it, that's what drives people in. And that's why we love the story, the characters, and fighting games as a whole. So I hope you can understand my frustration with this. I bought the game because it had BlazBlue in the title. I was expecting a continuation of the story from the fighting games, but instead I got a roguelike dungeon crawler. A very competent and fun dungeon crawler, but still, a dungeon crawler that doesn't involve the BlazBlue characters. Just imagine how interesting a story this would be if the characters were allowed to be characters. They're stuck in a dungeon and most of their powers and abilities have been stripped away. And the only way to get them back is to fight through a gauntlet of enemies. Just imagine how the characters present would react to that situation. Ragnar would rage in frustration and try to brute force his way out of there, only to get killed and respawn with most of his abilities lost and his memory of that intact. Jin would have a mental breakdown. He'd lose his powers over ice, and he could repeatedly see his brother get killed, or kill him on his own, depending on the situation. And these are just some ideas from the top of my head. Roguelikes as a genre have a lot of potential when it comes to character storytelling, and BlazBlue's characters would benefit greatly from this genre. The gameplay already shows that if you take a fighting game mechanic and just tweak it a bit, you can have a pretty solid action platform. You can run, jump, chain your basic attacks into combos, and if you time your attacks correctly, you can even perform special attacks. Not by doing some crazy command input for left, right, left, up, just press attack a couple of times, hold it, or press another button for a special attack, and that's about it. It's not as deep as fighting games, but it gets the point across. You see a bunch of enemies, you kill a bunch of enemies, and then you move on. After you clear a map, you'll be presented with several rewards, be it upgrades or new abilities, but they're usually randomized, so you will have to choose one of the three. Personally, I usually go for 2 or 3 basic attacks that just go for passives, just to keep it simple and do some passive damage while I run away from bosses, but it's up to every player how he wants to do it. In any case, keep in mind this is a roguelike, so not all upgrades are positive ones. Sometimes you can get a very good upgrade that does a lot of damage, but it will cost you your health points in order to use it. Either that, or you end up with 3 lousy upgrades and choose one of the lesser evils. In most cases, it is a new ability that will replace the existing one, which you already upgraded and put time and effort into learning the mechanics of, and you have to learn from scratch. Granted, if you get far enough into the dungeon, you'll be allowed to keep 2 of your abilities. So once you die, you can just take them again and try that build from scratch. Granted, even on your first run, you'll have a very sufficient run because the only real dangers are bosses, and you come across them after the 8th or 9th level. Every map you visit has 8 to 9 levels that you have to traverse through in order to get to the boss. After you finish each level, you have to choose a different path. One will lead you to stronger opponents and better rewards, while the other will lead you to a resting place, while another will lead you to a shop where you can get buffs and debuffs or some other upgrades for yourself. The paths work in a similar vein as the rewards for finishing a level. They're randomly chosen, so you have to choose which way you want to go. But in total, you always have 8 to 9 choices to make, and after that, off you go to a boss and see how well you fare. Depending on your choices, you'll either end up in a cakewalk or a death trap. One level will just be a simple get from point A to point B and kill everything in sight, while another one will be keep running, the fire's getting closer type of ordeal. It keeps the maps interesting and fun, in my opinion. You don't have to just do one thing, you have to do a little bit extra in order to get to the ending. And that's not the only thing that keeps the maps interesting. Every level is not randomly generated. They're randomly chosen, but they're all pre-made by actual people, I think. I'm not sure if it was an AI or a human that made the maps, but every level was made with a purpose and theme. And depending on which boss the game chooses to give you, the maps will be assorted in a way that hints which boss is coming to you. For example, on the first... I've been mixing up the levels and maps for a bit now, haven't I? Just to clarify, when I say maps, I mean the overall collection of levels that lead to a boss. So for the first map, we have a Watcher, which is a Frankenstein-looking monster, and a Sweeper, which is a claw-hovering droid that kills you and pulls you closer. Both of them have unique fighting mechanics, so the maps reflect that. The Watcher is a brawler, so the map is small and has level hazards which you have to avoid in order to attack him. And the Sweeper, well, that guy is long range, so the map is a bit longer and has a few areas where you can jump up and avoid his missile attacks. And that's just the first level. As you're progressing through the levels, you'll encounter different bosses with different mechanics. You don't get much of a choice on who you're fighting, but you do get a lot of hints as you're progressing through the areas in order to get to the boss. By that, I don't mean there are doors that will tell you, oh, this door leads to this boss and the other one leads to another. The game just randomly picks a boss for you and puts a selection of levels in order to get to him. And depending on the pattern you're getting, you can tell which boss is coming up, so you might want to consider your build beforehand as you're going along. When you finish a section of the map, you'll be presented with a choice. Either you can choose some additional attack abilities, upgrade existing ones, or just rest up and heal up. But by the end of the map, you'll accumulate several abilities that will help you in the future fights. It could be your character's signature move or a couple of status effects from different elements. And depending on how you combine them, you can destroy your enemies in 1 or 2 hits. But that depends on which upgrades you can get. The game will not give you the luxury of choice. I mean, it will give you a luxury of choice between several upgrades, which are randomly chosen, and you can only choose one of them. So there is a bit of luck and a lot of skill when it comes to combining those effects to work in your favor. Thankfully, most abilities work well with each other, so you can just randomly pick an assortment of abilities and see what works for you. Certain abilities will be a bit better than others, but every player has its own preferences, so make of that what you will. But if you have to choose between Sprint and an AoE, go for the AoE. And make sure your preferred abilities are always upgraded. If you manage to get far enough into the level, the game will let you keep 2 of your abilities upon death, as well as your power level. Your character's power level reflects, well, their power. But that's just a small bit of it. The more powerful the character, the more powerful their special ability and overall combat potential. And a better combat potential means better damage and better ability regeneration. But that's not all. Once you unlock additional characters and level them up properly, you'll be able to take them on as your additional abilities. Basically, the game will allow you to take 2 additional abilities from other characters, and the stronger those characters are, the stronger their abilities. Granted, if you ever played an action platformer, this game will not be too much of a challenge for you, but how do I put this? The game is not easy, but it's not difficult either. It's an enjoyable experience, but your only challenge will be the boss fights. The regular enemies rarely pose a challenge to anyone. They go down in 2 or 3 hits, and if you know how to combine your abilities, you can one-shot them. The only thing that's making the run towards the boss arena difficult is either the negative perks you get when you purchase strong upgrades, or the level hazards that you can run into if you're not paying attention. But don't take this as something negative. I like it when games are a bit easier on me when I'm not dealing with bosses. I can run around, be a badass, and then there's something stronger in front of me that has to be dealt with. It's a simple formula, but it works. I get to have some fun with lesser enemies, move to another arena, and deal with a boss. There are no arbitrary leveling systems, no roadblocks, no keys to collect. Just a simple, go there, kill this thing, done. Simple, effective, fun. And that's probably the main thing I want to tell you about this game. It's fun. Pure, simple fun. Sure, it's not long or complicated, but it doesn't have to be in order to be entertaining. The only gripes I have with the story is, it's not BlazBlue. It's a very competently made side-scroller with a bunch of BlazBlue characters stacked into it. Which is somewhat infuriating because when you see a title called BlazBlue, you expect a new adventure with the characters from BlazBlue. But then again, this game has been dormant for a while, so this might be as well of a wake-up call as any. If the sales figures for this game are big enough, Arc System might do something with the franchise, and we might see revivals similar to Guilty Gear Strive. Well, actually, it's Exert that revived the Guilty Gear franchise, but in any case, hope the point stands. BlazBlue is a very good franchise, and I wish to see it revived. But that's a topic for another video. The main point here is Entropy Effect, and I can assure you it's a fun experience that you will not regret purchasing. And with that said, I think my job here is done. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Bedomy, and good night.